So recently I was asked a question that I felt would make a very impactful video, and one that I feel really needs to be shared with all of you. Recently somebody asked me the question of, if you could go back to the Missy Renee who was just starting on this journey, just discovering Neville Goddard, what would you tell her to make things easier? Basically, what are the biggest misconceptions I had, and what I would have done differently, and how I would perceive things knowing what I know now. In my last video, I mentioned how it is becoming increasingly more difficult for some people with all this information and noise out here to really get a grasp on these teachings. A lot of things can be misinterpreted, a lot of things could be confusing and hard to understand. So today I want to talk about specifically three things, three of my main misconceptions or misunderstandings, and how to avoid this so that you have better understanding to manifest the life that you have always wanted. And we're going to go ahead and dive right in because there is a lot to cover. Misconception number one is probably going to be a little bit controversial? Controversial? Am I saying that right? Because it goes against what a lot of people pick up when they start watching these videos and learning about the law of assumption. And that is that your thoughts create your reality. Now, before I found Neville Goddard and the law of assumption, like most people, I was a student of the law of attraction. And this is very much a key concept from the law of attraction. The idea is that your thoughts create your reality. But this is not entirely true, or at least very misleading. And it can actually be dangerous if we are not careful in understanding this. I'm pretty open about a lot of the old patterns and habits and characteristics that I held, a lot of my old story. And one thing that I suffered from for a very long time was anxiety. I was a deeply anxious person for most of my life. So when I was taught this concept that your thoughts create reality, it genuinely made things worse. Because for myself, and what I've noticed happen for a lot of other people, is that anytime we have an intrusive thought, we become deeply fearful. We give our power to our thoughts. And it is not the thoughts themselves that hold power. It is not the thoughts themselves that create, because you are the operant power and you are not your thoughts. Your thoughts are the byproduct of whatever state of consciousness you may be occupying. So depending on the state or the mindset, the reality that you are in is going to determine the kinds of thoughts that you have come up naturally for you. Basically, what I have learned over the better part of these 2 decades that I've been a student of conscious manifestation is that we really have nothing to fear when it comes to our thoughts, because the thoughts themselves do not hold creative power. In fact, the only creative power that exists ever in this entire universe is I am. And that is God. That is you, specifically your consciousness. And if we hold to this idea that your thoughts create, then we are effectively at the mercy of our thoughts. And as everybody knows, your thoughts are unconscious. They are intrusive. We cannot help it, the thoughts that just pop into our mind. So if you're somebody who, like me, battles anxiety or OCD, and you're having these intrusive thoughts, it can create a horrible feedback loop of trying to combat your thoughts, being terrified that you're now going to create this thought, trying to push back against it, which is only giving more attention to that negative thought, and round and round and round we go, just spiraling down the drain. This is not how we need to look at this. In fact, it is not your thoughts that create. Now, can we manifest thoughts? If I have a thought about something, can I see it randomly outpictured? Of course. We may have a thought about something and then it is outpictured. That does happen. But the ingredient there is the feeling, if there was a charge or reaction behind it, and if I believe and assume it to be true. Again, we have to remember the name of these teachings, the name of this law is the law of assumption. It all comes down to what we are naturally believing and assuming to be true and what feels real for us. So no, you do not need to fear your thoughts. And if this is something that you have been battling or having some difficulties with, I definitely recommend checking out my video that I made talking about how to stop fearing your negative thoughts. I'll leave that guy up here and also down below in the description box. definitely be sure to check out my video. But ultimately, remember that you, as I am, is the one true and only operant power. The second misconception that I had that I feel is very common with others is the idea that this should be easy, that manifestation is super duper easy. This is incredibly misleading, and I want to break down for a second why. I would be willing to wager that you who are watching this have heard many times from many people that manifestation is super easy. This is easy. This is effortless. Literally, guys, you're overthinking it. You're overcomplicating it. But quite frankly, that is misleading because it is not always the case that it's going to be true, that it is going to be easy. And what we have to remember is this. Yes, manifestation itself is easy and effortless. And in fact, we are doing it all the time without even knowing, without even being conscious or aware of it. It comes as effortlessly to you as breathing because you are constantly moving through states. Depending on what you are selecting, based on the beliefs and assumptions you hold, you are always leaving impressions subconsciously that are always becoming outpictured. This is something you have always done, will always do, whether we want to or not, and whether we believe it or not. However, that said, when it comes to something that we desire, if that desire is in conflict with my beliefs and assumptions, then I may find it incredibly difficult to accept and trust and believe that desire. Basically, manifestation is easy from the right state. If you are already in that correct state, if your beliefs, if your assumptions, if your state of consciousness lines up with what you desire, then yeah, it's going to unfold for you effortlessly. But that said, if I have a belief that is in conflict, if I, let's say, have very low self-esteem, or I have very little faith in myself when it comes to my self-concept, then I may find it incredibly difficult to imagine and believe something to be true. Now, just as a disclaimer, as I always like to reiterate on this channel, I never like to speak in absolutes. Some people are going to naturally have a much easier go of things than others. This is not to imply that manifestation is going to be hard or has to be hard. Nothing is ever that black and white. This journey is a deeply personal one, and depending on your concept of self, your circumstances, your beliefs, your perceptions, it is going to be outpictured in a way that is uniquely you. But just like most people, I very much struggled for the longest time with guilt and frustration at myself because I was taught, or I was under the impression that all of this was supposed to be super easy. And for me personally, that was the furthest thing from the truth. Yes, I struggled. Yes, I often fell out of the desired state and back into the old way of thinking. Yes, my fears and doubts and insecurities got the best of me often. I had to persist in going back to that state I desired to occupy over and over again until it became something much more natural, something much more fitting and believable for me. I say this to say, please do not give yourself a hard time or beat yourself up if you are having difficulties. You are certainly not alone in this case. Manifestation is not always the easiest thing, especially if your current self-concept is opposite of what you desire to experience. And the third misconception is arguably the biggest and the one that I struggled with the most. And that was the idea that we'd have to take some kind of action to get what we want. That all of these teachings are to get something on the outside. And let me explain, because this is arguably the most important and often most misunderstood concept of all. To be clear, we all are here because there is something that we want. We want and desire an experience on the outside in the 3D that is different from what we currently see and experience. There is no denying that, and I need to make that abundantly clear. Yes, naturally, we desire a different external experience than what we currently have, but it is the mindset that is most important. And the mindset is not that we want to view this as a way to get something, like a means to an end. But we want to instead look at this in terms of becoming the person you want to be, the version of you that already has what you desire. It is the understanding that first and foremost, the change has to take place from within us. And I know that this is something that we've all heard probably thousands of times at this point, but we must really come to terms and understand this. We don't want to just hear it, take it, and dismiss it, which is what I personally did, and it cost me. Myself personally, I did not grasp at how vast this is. We hear all the time that we're always manifesting. You're always manifesting in every moment. But for myself personally, I failed to grasp the scope of what that meant. I spoke briefly in my last video about how a common perception that people have when it comes to manifestation is that we're viewing this as almost a method or a magic technique that is only being applied in this one specific area when we're using the techniques. That everything else in our world is just happening randomly, but if I focus on this one thing, if I apply this technique over here, I'm magically conjuring it. Basically, I failed to grasp the scope of what Neville meant when he said that everything in your world is an outpicturing of you, and that there is no action that we need to take, there is nothing that we need to do other than imagine and be, in imagination, the person we desire to be. This is why I would get so frustrated when it appeared like something failed, when I would use a technique to try to manifest something and the opposite showed up, or I didn't get the outcome that I had imagined. I used to take that to mean I failed at my manifestation, when in actuality, I was not aware of what I was thinking and doing and what I was naturally assuming the majority of the time. And due to my failure to observe my state during the day-to-day, due to my lack of understanding that it is the state that manifests, stemming from our beliefs and assumptions, any time that I manifested the opposite, I took it to mean I failed, instead of being observant and aware as to why things outpictured in the way that they did. I didn't question it, I just chalked it up to failure. And this is why I so often press the point of self-observation and being aware of the random thoughts, the random reactions, the things that we're doing on the subconscious level in our day-to-day. Because that is what points us to the natural and dominant state that we are occupying. Without that awareness, I'm not going to see the seeds that are being planted and what I am actually harvesting in my mind. This misconception also made me feel incredibly restless and uneasy at the idea that I didn't have to do anything. I was constantly feeling like if I wasn't doing something, if I wasn't actively pursuing my manifestation, if I wasn't doing techniques 24/7, then it wouldn't show up, then I wouldn't get it. And this approach actually kept me from living in the end and was the reason that things took as long as it did. Because by constantly fixating on the need to do something, the need to constantly be thinking and taking action on this outcome, this desire, kept me constantly in a state where I focused on the lack of it. I was constantly aware of the absence of my desire. So we have to trust that when it comes to taking action, your highest self, God within you, is the one that takes the action. And all we must do is trust that. Trust that God, the Father, the highest self, the universe, whatever you want to call it, knows all of the ways and means of expression and will allow things to naturally unfold for you if you let it. This is also why building faith in yourself as the creator and as the operant power is such an important aspect to these teachings and this practice. Without that faith, we're going to be constantly leaning on and dependent on the 3D circumstances and signs for confirmation. We're going to be constantly at the mercy of needing to do more to get it faster. What we must remember is that this is not about doing a bunch of techniques. This is about using the creative power that we have, our imagination, to experience what we want and trust that our highest and greatest self is going to lead us there effortlessly. It doesn't help that there are a lot of different schools of thought that get blended into Neville's teachings, and we wind up taking away a lot of things that are not entirely accurate or beneficial for us. There is a lot of trial and error. There's a lot of self-discovery. In fact, that's what this is all about. This is our journey of expansion, of evolution, of growth. And I felt very moved to make this video because these were things that really kept me from fully utilizing that state of the wish fulfilled. And if I could go back in time to that Missy Renee who was struggling, who was scared, who was constantly doubting and double-minded, these are the things that I would emphasize the most. It's not your thoughts that manifest, and you do not need to fear them. Manifesting is easy from the right state. But that is not always going to be the case, and it may not be the case for you. And if so, give yourself grace. Give yourself patience and understanding as you would to your very best friend. Do not be hard on yourself if this does not come very naturally and easy at first. And lastly, this is not about the actions that we take. This is not about doing a bunch of techniques to get something new materialize on the outside. This is about coming into our understanding that we are always, already, in every single moment, selecting a reality of experience, and that we can learn to do this more consciously through the use of our creative power, imagination. And the more that we come back to this, the more that we become aware, trust that it is your higher self, your highest self, that is God, that takes the actions for you. And that bridge of incidence will effortlessly appear if we allow it and we stop overthinking it. And ultimately, this is a journey of self-discovery. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to be confused at times. Things are not always going to line perfectly, and we're not always going to have the greatest clarity. But the more that we persist in coming back to self, coming back to awareness, and using our imagination to begin imagining things that feel joyous and fulfilling and satisfying instead of constantly feeding the fears and doubts, the more that we do this, the more natural and effortless everything will become. And that is how you become the master of your life and everything in it. So I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. I hope this helped to clarify a few things. Maybe you resonated with some, or maybe not. Either way, I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. And if you are interested in checking out any of my other resources, I will have links down below to my coaching programs, my workshops and masterclasses, my blog, my podcast, my social links. Got a ton of resources down in the description box below, so don't forget to check it out. Also be sure to check out the other videos on this channel. Be sure to check out my Manifestation Fundamentals playlist. Each video is a different topic, but it all talks about how to manifest the best life ever. So until we meet next time, as always, please take care, be well, and never forget how powerful you truly are. Happy manifesting, guys.